Most people never see them coming, not because they hide, but because they have mastered the art of being overlooked. They sit in the corner of the room, watching, absorbing, filing away every word, every micro-expression, every unguarded moment. By the time you realize what just happened, they already knew exactly what they were going to do, and they did it without saying a single word. Welcome to Lucid Dark. Today we go deep into the psychology of silent people and why silence is not weakness. It is the sharpest weapon in the human arsenal. Let's start with what most people get wrong. When someone is quiet, the instinct is to assume they are harmless, passive, maybe even simple. Society rewards talkers. The extrovert who dominates the room gets the promotion, the attention, the respect. The silent one gets dismissed. And that dismissal? That is exactly what the silent person is counting on. Psychologists have studied what happens when a person chooses not to speak in a group dynamic. What they found is disturbing and fascinating at the same time. People who withhold speech force others to fill the void, and people filling a void say things they never intended to say. They reveal insecurities. They over-explain. They expose their motivations. The silent person collects all of this. Without asking a single question, they receive a complete psychological profile of everyone in the room. That is not passivity. That is predatory intelligence in its most refined form. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called strategic ambiguity. When a person says very little, other people project their own interpretations onto them. You decide the silent person agrees with you, or that they are deep, or that they are plotting something, and often all three are true at once. This ambiguity gives the silent person an almost supernatural advantage. They become a mirror, and people trust their own reflection more than they trust anything else. Now here is where it gets truly dark. The silent person is not just collecting information. They are also controlling the emotional temperature of every space they enter. Think about the last time you were in a room with someone who refused to react. Someone who stayed completely still while everyone else was animated, laughing, arguing. What did you feel? Discomfort, curiosity, maybe a creeping sense of unease. That sensation is not accidental. It is a byproduct of power. When one person refuses to surrender to the emotional current of a group, they subtly become the one controlling it. This is known in social psychology as the observer effect applied to human dynamics. The one who observes without participating forces the participants to become self-conscious. Suddenly, people start performing for the silent person, seeking their approval, trying to decode their expression. The loudest person in the room becomes psychologically dependent on a reaction from the quietest. That is a complete reversal of perceived power, and the silent person engineered it without saying a word. But the danger does not stop at social manipulation. It goes much deeper. Silent people tend to have exceptionally high emotional regulation. They do not react impulsively. An impulsive reaction is the #1 reason most people lose conflicts, negotiations, and confrontations. When you express anger in real time, you show your hand. You reveal what matters to you. You tell the other person exactly where to apply pressure next time. The silent person never does this. They take the hit, they catalog it, and they decide later, in private, in calm, with complete control, how to respond. And when they respond, it is not emotional. It is surgical. There is a Japanese concept called MR. It translates roughly as negative space, or the pause between things. In music, it is the silence between notes that gives them meaning. In architecture, it is the empty space that defines the form. In human behavior, Ma is what the silent person weaponizes. They understand that what is not said carries more weight than what is. A well-placed silence in a conversation is louder than any argument. It forces the other person to confront their own words, their own guilt, their own assumptions. And it does so without giving the silent person any exposure whatsoever. Now let's talk about the most dangerous category of silent person. And this one you need to understand deeply. The silent planner. This is the individual who appears to simply be going along. No complaints, no resistance, no obvious agenda. But underneath that calm exterior, they are processing every detail of the situation. They are identifying leverage points, mapping exits, calculating outcomes. When they finally move, it looks sudden to everyone watching, but it was never sudden. It was the last step of a plan that began in the silence no one was paying attention to. History is full of these individuals, the leaders who said least in meetings but made the most consequential decisions, the strategists who barely spoke but who saw 17 moves ahead while others were still arguing about the first one, the employees who quietly documented everything, never complained to management, and then one day presented a case so airtight that no one had a single counter-argument. Silence is not the absence of strategy. It is strategy in its purest, most concentrated form. Here is something that most people never consider. The emotional intelligence of a quiet person is often extraordinary, and it is precisely because they have trained themselves to listen rather than speak. The average person spends most of a conversation preparing their response rather than actually listening. They are already formulating what they want to say before the other person has finished their sentence. The silent person does not do this. They hear everything. The tone beneath the words, the hesitation before a lie, the overconfidence masking fear. They process all of it before they speak, and when they speak, it lands with devastating precision because it is based on something real. This brings us to another dark truth. Silent people are extraordinarily difficult to manipulate. Most manipulation techniques rely on catching someone emotionally off guard. You flatter them, they open up. You provoke them, they react. You create urgency, they panic and comply. But the silent person does not react on your timeline. They see the flattery for what it is. They recognize the provocation as bait. And the urgency you manufacture does not penetrate their measured, deliberate thinking. Trying to manipulate a truly silent person is like trying to hold water with an open hand. There is nothing to grip. And yet, this same emotional discipline makes them capable of something even more unsettling. When a silent person decides to deploy charm, it is absolute, because they have spent so long observing what people want to hear, what makes them feel safe, what resonates with their particular insecurities and desires. When they choose to turn that knowledge towards someone, the effect is overwhelming. It does not feel like manipulation. It feels like finally being understood. And that is the most dangerous feeling one person can create in another. Let's address something important. Not every silent person is malicious. In fact, most are not. Many are simply operating from a place of deep internal processing, genuine introversion, or a hard-won understanding that words spoken carelessly create damage that cannot be undone. The silence can come from wisdom rather than strategy, from peace rather than calculation. But the mechanisms are the same. The power dynamic that silence creates exists whether the silent person intends it or not. Which means that if you are quiet by nature, you are wielding influence you may not even be fully aware of. This is the part that should genuinely make you pause. Silence is one of the few forms of power that requires no resources, no status, no physical advantage. It is available to anyone, at any time. The most isolated, overlooked, and underestimated person in any situation can shift the entire dynamic simply by choosing not to speak, simply by watching, simply by waiting. In a world that is louder than ever, where everyone is competing for attention, broadcasting opinions, filling every silence with content, the person who can simply be still becomes almost incomprehensibly powerful. So what do you do with this? First, if you encounter a silent person, do not mistake their quiet for consent, confusion, or weakness. They are evaluating. Second, watch what you reveal in their presence. The void they create is a test, and most people fail it by talking too much. Third, if you want to develop this kind of presence yourself, start practicing discomfort with silence. Resist the urge to fill every pause. Let your words cost something. Speak only when you have something to say that a silence could not say better. Because at the end of every conversation, every negotiation, every conflict, the one who spoke less usually understood more, and the one who understood more was always the one in control. Remember that. The next time the room goes quiet and someone in the corner is watching,